I want us to think about domains of learning. So what do we mean by domains of learning? We think of three domains of learning: cognitive, psychomotor, and affective domain of learning. So cognitive is the one that we, quickly think of whenever we think about education, which is gaining knowledge. So this is, talking about intellectual skills, cognitive strategy, verbal information, and so forth. And then psychomotor is transfer of education or learning when it comes to manual. So physical actions, reflexes, interpretive movements, and so forth. And then the third one, which is affective, is the attitude of the learner, how their disposition is, appropriate emotions, and responses. So as educators, it's important for us to think about to which domain of learning we are preparing an education time so that we can have appropriate metrics and appropriate tools for that specific domain of learning. So in anesthesia, what are examples of this? So cognitive, for example, if we're teaching someone about neuromuscular junction, what happens at the motor end plate, what are the channels that are affected, what does calcium do, do other agents do this to this neuromuscular junction? So all those things would be considered the cognitive domain of education. Whereas psychomotor, a good example in anesthesia would be teaching someone how to do an intubation. And then affective would be thinking about how, a physician cares for a baby, how a physician interacts with family members, how, a physician decides or, thinks about the ethical things of end of life decisions and so forth. So as educators and as people who create programs and as people who think about how to evaluate our residents or any group of people we're teaching, both our methods of teaching as well as our ways of evaluating people needs to consider all these three different domains. I'll give you as an example for our residency programs. We have something called competency, and our competencies for the residents at the end of training not only include cognitive, which is very kind of straightforward in what we think about, but it also includes psychomotor as well as affective and attitudes. Okay, so for each of these domains, there are different steps. We'll go over the cognitive domains when we go over Bloom's taxonomy, but there are 6 different steps that we think about for cognitive domain steps and tools. For psychomotor domains skills, you start from thinking about reflex movements. You think about fundamental movements. You should think about the physical ability, endurance, flexibility, agility. Then their perceptual ability. Then you go to the level of skilled movements that must be learned to be able to achieve the end goal. And then the non-discursive communication, movements through posture, gestures, facial expressions, and so forth. For affective domain steps and examples, receiving phenomena, being aware, having an ability to listen, responding to phenomena, active participation from learners, willing to respond, valuing, attaching value to a phenomenon, organization, how you organize your values into priorities, what needs to come first, what needs to come second, and then characterization, internalization of values. So questions for you guys to consider as you design a curriculum, as you think about how and what to teach in the classroom, and as you think about how to evaluate your trainees, if it, in terms of cognitive, what cognitive skills, strategies, and information in this, particular classroom. Um, for study motor, what motor skills your students need in order to be successful in this field of study. In anesthesia, a good example is intubation, putting arterial lines, putting central lines. And then we should also consider effective, which I don't think a lot of programs consider, at least has been my experience in Ethiopia, is that what attitude would be useful for your students to cultivate in order to benefit their learning and their career in their field and in fields of anesthesia. So as leaders, it's important for you guys to think about all these three different domains.